No benefits, no claims. She's a fake vet. My brother jeered as the will was read. He didn't notice my lawyer had slipped the judge an unopened envelope. The judge's face went pale. Officers, seal this court immediately. The wind swept low across the open plains of Montana, carrying with it the scent of pine and memory. Emily Garrison stood alone at the edge of the cemetery, her dress uniform pristine, her posture rigid. The flag-draped coffin of her father, William Garrison, rested under a simple white canopy, surrounded by weathered ranchers, old neighbors, and a handful of curious onlookers who barely concealed their whispers. Her metals clinked softly with each gust, yet her face betrayed no emotion. She had buried comrades before. This was different. Behind her, Trevor Garrison leaned against a black SUV, arms crossed, a smirk cutting across his face like a scar. His jeans were too tight, his boots too polished, Montana showmanship at its laziest. He hadn't spoken a word to her since she arrived that morning, but the judgment in his gaze screamed louder than any insult. "Nice costume," he muttered as she turned to approach. Did the Air Force surplus store have a sale? Emily stopped, eyed her brother for a long second. "This uniform," she said, her voice steady, "was earned." Trevor laughed, loud enough for those nearby to hear. "Sure it was. Funny how nobody can find your name in the VA database. No benefits, no claims, no service record. Convenient." She didn't flinch. She had expected this. Trevor had always been the favorite after she left, the one who stayed behind to work the land with their father, who called her ghost sister when she didn't visit for holidays. And now he stood there like he'd already won, his arms around the idea of inheritance. The funeral ended quietly. No eulogies. William hadn't wanted one. Emily laid a hand on the flag, then stepped away without a word. As the crowd dispersed, she walked toward the courthouse down the street. The will was to be read within the hour. Nathan Price, her lawyer, waited by the entrance. Tall, mild-mannered, and meticulous, he handed her a sealed envelope without a word. She took it and slipped it into the inside pocket of her blazer. "Still good on the timing?" she asked. Nathan nodded. "Judge Peterson is expecting us." Trevor arrived late to courtroom, swaggering in with two men in boots and buzz cuts, likely cousins from the next town. He slouched into a chair, grinning at Emily like he knew a punchline she didn't. A court clerk called for silence, and the judge, an aging man with deep creases around his eyes, entered the room. William's will, like his life, was direct. The clerk began reading aloud. "To my son, Trevor Garrison, I leave the tools in the workshop in the red Chevy truck, provided he maintains it in working order. To my daughter, Emily Garrison, I leave all remaining property, including the family ranch, the financial accounts, and holdings." Gasps echoed. Trevor shot up from his seat. "What the hell is this?" The clerk continued, unfazed. "Distribution is contingent upon verification of sealed documentation, as discussed with my legal representative." Trevor laughed. "No way. This is fraud. She's not even a real vet. She faked everything. There's no proof she served, no public record." "That's enough," Judge Peterson said, his tone sharp. Emily remained silent, eyes forward. Trevor turned to her, furious. "You think you can walk in here after 10 years and take everything? You think wearing a fake uniform makes you the hero?" Before the judge could respond, Nathan stepped forward and, with a practiced gesture, placed a sealed envelope onto the bench. The judge looked at him, puzzled. "What is this?" "Per William Garrison's final legal arrangements," Nathan replied. "This envelope is to be reviewed in private by Your Honor before further discussion." The judge hesitated, then took the envelope. He broke the seal, pulled out several documents, and began to read. Silence gripped the courtroom. Seconds passed. Then a minute. The judge's face slowly turned pale. He stood abruptly. "Officers," sealed his courtroom. "No one leaves." The bailiffs jumped into motion, locking the doors, instructing everyone to hand over their phones and step away from the exits. Murmurs of confusion rose. Trevor turned to the judge. "What the hell is going on?" The judge ignored him. Emily didn't move. She didn't need to. She had been trained for situations like this. Tension, confusion, the unknown. This was not a battlefield, but it was something close. Trevor's voice was rising. "Judge, that envelope, what's in there? What's going on?" The judge turned to the bailiffs. "Confiscate all electronic devices. This proceeding is now under restricted review. Contact federal authorities." Chaos broke across the courtroom. One of Trevor's cousins tried to argue with the bailiff. A woman in the back began filming, only to have her phone snatched away. The judge slammed his gavel. "Order. This matter is no longer local. We proceed under sealed jurisdiction until further notice." Trevor shouted across the room, "You can't be serious." "She forged it. That whole thing is a setup." Emily met his eyes for the first time since the funeral. "You should have read the fine print," she said. And with that, the balance of power in the room shifted. The air inside the sealed courtroom had shifted from tense to suffocating. The hum of fluorescent lights overhead provided a sterile soundtrack to confusion that had seized the room. Judge Peterson sat unmoving, the document from the envelope now stacked in front of him like a silent wall. The clerk hovered behind him, whispering instructions to the bailiffs as they collected phones and swept the room for recording devices. Trevor's indignation had transformed into an uneasy silence, though his eyes remained fixed on his sister, with a mixture of suspicion and something deeper, fear. Emily didn't speak. Her mind moved quickly, but her expression betrayed nothing. She kept her hands folded on her lap, her gaze straight ahead. Nathan Price leaned toward her, whispering without turning his head. "Now we wait," he said quietly. "He'll have to verify the documents, but from the look on his face, he knows exactly what he's holding." She nodded once, not needing more. This moment had been anticipated. Not the exact way it played out, but the escalation, the pushback, the exposure. Her father had warned her it wouldn't be simple. Judge Peterson finally stood, motioning toward the door at the back of the courtroom. "Court will recess briefly. Miss Garrison, Mr. Price, follow me." Everyone else will remain seated. Trevor started protest, but the bailiff nearest him shut him down with a firm look and a subtle step forward. The message was clear. He was no longer in control of the room, and his bravado was running on fumes. Emily and Nathan followed the judge through the narrow hall that led to his chambers. The heavy door shut behind them with a solid thud. The judge didn't sit right away. He remained standing, staring at the documents laid out across his desk, then looked up at Emily. "These files are above my clearance level," he said, voice low. "Some of these documents are marked Department of Defense, restricted access only. They're dated from 2012 and refer to an active intelligence operation." Emily remained composed. "I can answer some of your questions, but only in general terms." The judge sat slowly. "Then let me ask you this. Were you under contract with the Department of Defense during the year 2012? "Yes," she replied without hesitation. "As a civilian intelligence analyst assigned to Operation Ridgeglass." The judge blinked, clearly recognizing the name. "That operation is still classified." "I'm aware. My role was expunged from the public record for security reasons. My deployment was under a temporary clearance that expired after the mission ended." The judge glanced at Nathan. "And your client's father had these documents. How?" Nathan spoke with careful precision. "Mr. William Garrison received them directly from Emily during a private meeting several months ago. He stored them securely at her request, understanding the potential consequences if they were mishandled. And why give them to me now?" "Because," Emily said, stepping forward, "Trevor is going to contest the will. He's going to claim I fabricated my military background to manipulate our father into leaving me everything. These documents prove otherwise and much more." The judge considered this in silence. Then he opened the top drawer of his desk and pulled out a phone, one with a secure red stripe across the bottom. He began dialing. "We're escalating this. I need authentication from Washington. In the meantime, I'll order a temporary freeze on all assets related to the estate until this is resolved." Nathan nodded. "That's acceptable." The judge paused mid-dial. "One more thing. If what I'm seeing here is even half accurate, then someone outside this courtroom has a vested interest in suppressing it." Emily's voice was steady. Yes, and they'll come. Back in the courtroom, Trevor was pacing. His two companions sat rigid, their cowboy bravado quickly unraveling. He turned sharply when Emily and Nathan re-entered, his voice sharp. So, what's in the magic envelope? Nathan ignored him and walked calmly to their table. Emily followed, her expression unchanged. The judge returned moments later, visibly calmer but firm. Until further notice, this hearing is suspended from public record. All proceedings will occur under closed conditions. Anyone unwilling to comply may leave now, permanently. Trevor scowled but said nothing. The judge continued. The documents presented contain information relevant to national defense and are under review by the appropriate federal offices. We will resume once I receive confirmation of their authenticity. Until then, no changes to the estate shall occur. Bailiffs, please escort everyone outside except for the involved parties. Emily remained seated as the courtroom was slowly cleared. She could feel Trevor's glare burning holes into her shoulder, but she didn't turn to face him. Nathan leaned over, voice low. We bought some time, but not much. That envelope is a fuse. The question is, who lit it? After the room was emptied, the judge called Emily and Trevor forward again. I have one question for both of you, he said. Did either of you speak to William Garrison about this estate in the final 3 months before his death? Trevor replied instantly. No, he barely spoke to me after Christmas. Emily took a breath. Yes, he reached out to me in June, said he was worried. He didn't explain everything, but he knew someone was trying to dig into my past. The judge nodded slowly. That tracks with what I'm seeing. He didn't fully trust the local channels. He left instructions with his attorney that if anything happened to him, the contents of that envelope were to be reviewed at the time of the will reading, not before. Trevor was nearly shaking. Are you all seriously going to just believe this? She disappears for 10 years, shows up in a uniform that can't be verified, and drops a bunch of secret papers in your lap, and you're all just buying it. The judge turned to him, voice cold. If you think this is about inheritance now, Mr. Garrison, you're mistaken. This is bigger than your ranch or your grudges. Sit down and stay quiet. Trevor did not move for a second, then slowly returned to his seat, fuming. His face had gone red, but the fight in his eyes had started to dull, replaced by something more desperate. The judge tapped a finger on the desk. We'll reconvene in the morning. Miss Garrison, Mr. Price, I suggest you remain nearby. Mr. Garrison, do not attempt to leave the county. Emily rose. Understood. The bailiffs escorted them out, the hallway buzzing with hushed voices and tension. Outside, the late afternoon sun hit hard against the cold concrete, but it did little to warm the chill that now gripped the courthouse. As Nathan and Emily walked toward the car, he glanced over. There's going to be noise tonight. Your brother's not the kind to lose quietly. Emily nodded. Let him make noise. It's the silence we should worry about. Nathan looked at her for a long second. You think he knows more than he's saying? I know he does, she said flatly. And I think my father knew that too. That's why he waited until after he was gone to let this start. Nathan opened the car door for her. But before she stepped in, she looked back at the courthouse. Its old stone walls now the front lines of something far bigger than any family dispute. Tomorrow, she said, almost to herself, we find out what else my father left behind. The courthouse sat under a bruised Montana sky the next morning, its doors guarded now not just by county deputies, but by 2 federal agents in plain clothes who were impossible to mistake. Their stance, their earpieces, the practiced neutrality on their faces. It all screamed one thing to Emily as she approached with Nathan. The content of the envelope had officially triggered federal involvement. Inside, the atmosphere was clinical. The courtroom had been rearranged. Gone were the public seating rows. In their place, 2 long tables faced a bench, behind which Judge Peterson now sat with a stack of new files. One of the agents stood to his left, the other near the door, scanning every movement like a hawk. Trevor had already arrived. He sat slumped in his chair, arms folded, his jaw clenched. He didn't look at Emily when she entered. Nathan gave her a nod and led her to their seats. Before either of them could speak, Judge Peterson cleared his throat. This court is now operating under special federal protection due to the nature of the documents submitted yesterday. By order of Provisional National Security Protocols, all present are hereby subject to limited clearance constraints. Any violation of confidentiality will result in immediate detainment and federal charges. Trevor scoffed under his breath. This is ridiculous. The agent near the judge turned slightly. Mr. Garrison, I strongly advise against further commentary unless prompted. Peterson adjusted his glasses and continued. Preliminary review confirms that the content of the envelope are authentic. Department of Defense identifiers and seal marks have been verified. We have received confirmation that Emily Garrison served as a civilian contractor under restricted assignment during Operation Ridgeglass. Trevor sat up straighter, eyes wide. However, the judge went on, details regarding the mission remain classified. This court will not be handling the nature or outcome of that operation. What concerns us is a connection between the documents and the stipulations of William Garrison's will. He paused, then addressed Emily directly. Miss Garrison, your father named you sole heir to the estate, pending review of the sealed documents. Based on what I've seen, he entrusted you with sensitive material out of concern for your safety and credibility. What I need to understand now is how he came to possess these files and what you believe he was trying to protect. Emily looked at Nathan, who gave her a subtle nod. She stood. My father contacted me last summer, she said clearly. He told me he had been approached by someone asking questions about my past. Details they shouldn't have known unless they had access to restricted files. He didn't tell me who, only that it didn't feel right. We agreed to meet privately. During that meeting, I gave him copies of documents related to my service and told him to keep them sealed. I didn't want them in my possession, given their nature. The judge leaned forward. Why not submit them to the Department of Defense directly? Because I wasn't sure who was asking questions, and because some of those documents contradict the official summary of the operation. If someone inside the system was already manipulating the truth, I needed an external safeguard. Trevor suddenly stood, fists clenched at his sides. She's trying to spin this like some damn spy thriller. You're seriously buying this? The agent at the door moved toward him. Sit down, Mr. Garrison. Now. Trevor dropped back into his seat, his glare cutting toward Emily like a knife. Judge Peterson nodded at the agent and then turned to Trevor. You are welcome to present evidence to dispute your sister's claims. Do you have any documentation regarding your father's estate or communications that would suggest coercion or fraud? Trevor hesitated. I know my father. He would hand over everything to someone who disappeared for a decade. That's not evidence. The judge said flatly, It's sentiment. Trevor's mouth opened, then shut. He looked around the room as though expecting someone to jump to his defense. No one did. Nathan rose. Your Honor, I would like to request temporary legal protection from Miss Garrison. The escalation of federal presence suggests that we're not dealing with a simple inheritance dispute. If her life was at risk before, that risk may increase now. The judge considered the request. The agent near him gave a small nod. Granted, she will be under protective supervision until the matter is resolved. Emily sat down again, eyes fixed on the judge. But her mind was already spinning. There was still something missing, something her father hadn't told her. His decision to condition the will on the opening of the envelope suggested that he knew it would cause a stir. But why hadn't he told her more? Later that afternoon, the courtroom was cleared for an hour as the agents conferred with higher authorities. Emily and Nathan waited in a side chamber where the air felt even thinner than before. He paced while she remained seated, reviewing her own notes. Trevor's unraveling, Nathan muttered. He's not going to hold together much longer. He never could under pressure, Emily replied. But he's not dumb. He's angry, and he has help. Nathan stopped pacing. You think he's not acting alone? She closed her folder and looked up at him. I think someone wanted those documents gone. And if Trevor was approached first, they probably gave him a reason to go along with it. Nathan frowned. That would explain the timing. Your father updates his will 6 months before he dies, suddenly hands you sealed files, and then refuses to tell anyone else. and then dies under natural causes, Emily added. But nobody performed a full autopsy. Before Nathan could respond, there was a knock at the chamber door. The agent entered, followed by the judge. "We're resuming," the judge said. "But be advised, there will be more scrutiny now, and likely more attention." Back in the courtroom, the tone had shifted yet again. The room was quieter, heavier. Judge Peterson addressed them both. "I have received word that a request has been filed to open a broader investigation into the chain of custody of these documents. Additionally, we have learned that one of the documents contained a data string that may serve as a key to a classified digital archive." Emily's eyes narrowed. She hadn't seen any such key, but she hadn't had time to study everything in detail. The judge continued, "Until further notice, this court is considered a holding zone for classified material. Any attempt to tamper with records, mislead this bench, or disrupt proceedings will be met with federal prosecution." Trevor looked visibly shaken now. He had stopped glaring. He had stopped fuming. He was calculating. And Emily knew exactly what that look meant. He was cornered, which meant he was about to do something reckless. Trevor Garrison didn't sleep that night. Instead, he paced the kitchen floor of his late father's house, still dusty with disuse, the air heavy with memories and something more recent, paranoia. The old clock on the wall ticked without rhythm, filling the silence between his frantic thoughts. The humiliation in court had been more than a blow to his ego. It had been a crack in the foundation of everything he expected to inherit. And now the feds were involved. That changed the game. He picked up the glass of whiskey he had poured an hour earlier and took a slow sip, ignoring the burn. The house was dark, lit only by the thin light spilling to the window above the sink. He stared into the blackness outside, then made a call. "Yeah," he muttered when the line clicked. "We need to do something now. I don't care who she's got watching her." A voice responded on the other end, low, deliberate, tense. "You were told to keep things clean. You're losing control." Trevor exhaled sharply. "I didn't think she'd bring out classified stuff. I thought she'd walk in, play soldier, and we'd challenge it and win. But now there's a damn investigation." There was a pause. Then you shift the angle. If her records don't exist publicly, that means they can still be questioned. You don't have to disprove them. You just have to make enough noise that the court hesitates. Buy time. Discredit her. Use what you have. Trevor hesitated, then nodded. "I have one idea." The next morning, court resumed under the same sealed conditions, but the tension had thickened. Federal agents remained in place, and the judge was more restrained than before. Choosing his words carefully, Emily entered the courtroom with Nathan beside her, both alert and composed. There was no room for error now. Trevor was already at his table, dressed sharper than the day before, his demeanor forced into something approaching calm. But Emily could see the nervous energy coiling under his skin. The session began, and the judge quickly summarized the standing issues: confirmation of Emily's classified service, the estate's conditional distribution, and the sealed data string yet to be decoded. But just as he prepared to address the matter of digital verification, Trevor stood. "Your Honor, I have evidence to present that calls into question the origin of the documents submitted by the petitioner." Judge Peterson raised an eyebrow. "You may proceed." Trevor opened a slim folder and handed it to the bailiff, who delivered it to the bench. The judge examined the contents, flipping through several printed pages. These appear to be signatures from the Department of Defense Registry database. The judge said, "What exactly are we looking at?" Trevor walked forward, hands clasped. "Those are registry logs from the DoD's archive, public-facing metadata pulled from a FOIA request I filed 2 weeks ago. They show no record of Emily Garrison ever serving in any capacity, civilian or military, during or after 2012. Nathan stood immediately. "Your Honor, we've already established that her assignment was classified and that such records would not appear in public registries." Trevor didn't wait for a reply. That's convenient, isn't it? A supposed service history that conveniently vanishes from every system. And now she shows up with a sealed envelope of proof? What's to stop someone from forging those files, especially if they're banking on the fact that no one can openly verify them? Emily remained seated, her face unreadable. But inside, her pulse began to tick faster. She'd expected a backlash, but this direct attack on the authenticity of the documents was more dangerous than bluster. It was a strategic pivot, one with consequences. The judge reviewed the pages again, then looked at Emily. "Miss Garrison, do you wish to respond?" She stood calmly. "Yes, Your Honor. The absence of records is not evidence of forgery. I signed a non-disclosure agreement under a Title X contract. The operation was classified Tier 3. I was debriefed under sealed supervision and relocated to a non-public advisory position afterward. Everything that confirms this is in the envelope, which your office verified." Trevor stepped forward again. "That's not good enough. Anyone can say the word classified. I want the documents examined for forgery, independent authentication, ink analysis, signature matching, timestamp verification. If they're real, she shouldn't be afraid." Nathan narrowed his eyes. "That is a blatant stalling tactic." Trevor turned to face the room. Or maybe it's the only way to get the truth. She shows up after 10 years, with no paper trail, and suddenly she's a war hero? Her story doesn't hold. And until forensic team clears those documents, you're just taking her word for it. The judge raised a hand, silencing both men. Then he looked at the agent stationed in the room. "Can the Federal Review Team handle forensic authentication of physical documents under secure conditions?" One of the agents stepped forward. "Yes, Your Honor, but it will take 48 to 72 hours for a preliminary report." The judge nodded slowly. "Very well. The documents will be transported to a secure facility immediately after the session. In the meantime, court is adjourned until further notice. Miss Garrison will remain under protection. Mr. Garrison is not to leave the county and will surrender his personal electronics to the court." Trevor stiffened. "Why mine?" "Because this is now a federal inquiry. You initiated the claim of forgery. Your digital activity will be reviewed for evidence of tampering, sourcing, or collusion. Standard procedure." Nathan allowed himself a small exhale of satisfaction. Emily said nothing. As the courtroom emptied, Trevor caught her eye. His face a mask of restrained fury and veiled panic. Outside, the courthouse was ringed with unmarked sedans and black SUVs. Federal presence had intensified. Emily was escorted to a private vehicle by agents who said little but moved with coordinated precision. Nathan rode with her, briefcase in hand, scanning the streets as they pulled away. "You know what this means," he said. "If the documents are compromised in any way, mislabeled, misfiled, even the smallest inconsistency, they'll weaponize it." Emily looked out the window. "I know. He's trying to bury you through doubt, make the system second-guess itself." She turned to face him. "Then we can't rely on the system alone." Nathan raised an eyebrow. "You have something in mind?" Trevor's fishing in muddy waters. He's not smart enough to find those logs on his own. Someone helped him. Someone with access. And I'm betting they left a trail. Nathan frowned. "You want to trace a forgery claim through back channels?" "I want to find out who's feeding him." Nathan hesitated, then nodded. "All right, but you'll have to do it off the grid. The official channels are frozen." Emily reached into her bag and pulled out a small encrypted drive. "Then it's a good thing I kept a backup." Rain began to fall over the Montana plains as dusk settled, soft but persistent, drumming quietly against the roof of the safe house where Emily had been relocated. It was a modest cabin, government-owned but disguised as a private property nestled between trees and distance. Nathan sat at the kitchen table, his laptop open and glowing faintly, while Emily stood by the window, the encrypted drive still in her hand. She had held on to it for years, never connected it to a network, never opened it without a cold machine, and never told anyone outside of her father about its existence. The files it contained weren't just personal records or deployment logs. They were digital fragments of mission that had never been acknowledged in any public or military documentation. Operation Ridgeglass was a ghost, and she had been one of its shadows. Nathan broke the silence. "I've got a secure channel set up. This laptop is clean. If we're going to look, now's the time." Emily sat beside him and slid the drive into the port. The screen flickered, then loaded a simple interface with no labels, just file paths and encrypted archives, each one time-stamped and locked. She entered the decryption key from memory, and within seconds, a list of documents appeared. After scrolling through several, she clicked on one marked simply as directive_PDF. It opened to a scanned document, stamped with a Department of Defense header, followed by redacted paragraphs and a series of coordinates. "This isn't a mission order," Nathan muttered. "It's a reclassification notice. It's an order to bury the operation." Emily nodded. "That came after the event, after the fallout. What exactly happened out there?" She leaned back, eyes fixed on the screen, but seeing something far older, burned into her memory. "We were sent to intercept a rogue cell that had hijacked tech during a withdrawal phase. The targets weren't confirmed insurgents. They were in a gray zone, suspected collaborators with one of our own contractors. But the command didn't want to delay the extraction. They pushed forward." Nathan studied her. "And something went wrong? There was a call, misinterpreted intelligence. A drone strike was launched on a convoy we believed was hostile. Turned out it was ours. I flagged it too late. 5 Americans died. One of them was a whistleblower. That's why the file was sealed. Not to protect the mission, to protect those who ordered it." He closed the laptop slowly. "And now someone's trying to keep it sealed. At any cost." Emily stood again, pacing now. "The strange thing is, this wasn't supposed to matter anymore. The operation was buried. The surviving officers were reassigned or quietly retired. But then someone went digging years later. Someone knew what to look for, and they wanted to use Trevor as a pawn." Nathan's mind worked quickly, which means this is about the will. It's about something buried in those files. Something they think your father had access to. Emily turned sharply. "He did. There was a second set. The physical copies. The ones I gave him weren't the full archive. Just enough to prove who I was. But he asked me if there was more. I didn't answer him then." Nathan tilted his head. "So where's the rest?" She hesitated. "He told me once, if anything ever happened, to go to the ranch. The basement," he said, "behind the barrels. Look for the beam that creaks." I thought he was being sentimental. Nathan was already grabbing his coat. "We need to get there before Trevor does." An hour later, under skies still weeping steady rain, they reached the ranch. It was silent, no lights visible, no vehicles in sight. Nathan parked down the hill, and they approached on foot. Emily moved with practiced precision, scanning for signs of recent entry. The front door was locked, so was the back. Inside, nothing seemed disturbed. Dust still clung to the mantel, and the smell of aged wood and cattle feed lingered in the walls. They moved to the basement entrance quietly, Emily leading with a flashlight. The stairs creaked as they descended. At the bottom was a row of aging barrels, once used for rainwater collection. Emily pushed them aside, revealing a support beam tucked into the corner. She knocked once, then again. On the third knock, it gave a slight echo. Hollow. Nathan pulled a small tool from his bag and pried at the edge. The beam shifted, revealing a narrow compartment lined with a military-style waterproof case. Emily lifted it out carefully, wiped the dust from its surface, and opened it. Inside were 2 things. A sealed manila envelope, heavier than it looked, and a black hard drive with faded sticker that read, "Ridge glass, full archive." Nathan let out a breath. He kept it, all of it. She picked up the envelope and read the handwriting on the front, to be opened only if they come for her. Her father's handwriting. They took both items and left quickly. Emily secured the case in a hidden compartment beneath the vehicle's floorboard. As they drove back toward town, Nathan made a call to the federal agents assigned to the case, requesting a secure lab to examine the drive the following morning. But they never made it back. At the last bend before rejoining the highway, a truck swerved from the tree line and blocked the road. Nathan braked hard, the car skidding in the wet gravel. 3 men emerged from the truck, faces hidden beneath black hoods. 2 carried tactical shotguns. Emily reacted first, unbuckling and reaching under the seat. She pulled free a compact Glock, and the moment when the men stepped forward, she fired a warning shot into the ground. The men stopped. One raised a hand. We only want the drive. Nathan grabbed the case. You're not getting anything. The man with the raised hand stepped forward. You're not going to the authorities. You're not uploading that archive. You're going to forget this. Emily stepped between them. You think threatening me will make this go away? The man said nothing. Then a voice came from a radio on his shoulder. Pull out. Orders changed. He hesitated, then nodded. The men returned to the truck, reversed, and disappeared into the trees. Nathan exhaled. That wasn't a robbery. That was a message. Emily looked down at the case. No, that was desperation. They didn't know we found the full archive. They thought we only had fragments. Now, they know we have everything. By the time they returned to the safe house, the rain had stopped, but the night was still thick with tension. Nathan pulled the SUV into the garage and shut the door behind him before speaking. His hands remained clenched on the steering wheel longer than necessary. They followed us out there, he said. That wasn't random. Someone on the inside knew we were going to the ranch. Emily didn't disagree. She stepped out of the vehicle and opened the hidden compartment, retrieving the military case. The weight of it in her arms was more than physical. It was a decade of buried history, a truth someone had killed to keep silent. She could feel its significance as a dull pressure in her chest, a thrum of consequence that hadn't left her since the attack on the road. We're past the point of secrecy, she said. Once we unlock this, there's no going back. Nathan motioned toward the far room of the house, a secure den turned makeshift operations center. Inside was the encrypted laptop, shielded from external networks. Emily placed a hard drive beside it, then took the sealed manila envelope and sat down. She hadn't opened it yet. Her father's handwriting stared back at her, to be opened only if they come for her. With a breath, she slid her finger under the flap and unfolded the contents. There were 3 items inside: a handwritten letter, a photograph of a younger William Garrison, a man in uniform whose face Emily didn't recognize, and a memory card wrapped in black tape. She unfolded the letter. Emily, if you're reading this, it means they didn't stop. I always hoped it wouldn't come to this. But when I saw what you were up against, I knew I had to keep something back. Not just for your safety, but to finish what you couldn't. That drive contains a Ridge Glass archive, but it's not the whole story. What they did wasn't just a cover-up. It was a transfer, a repurpose. The tech that caused the deaths, it wasn't destroyed. It was stolen, and it didn't go overseas. It stayed here, in American hands. Look at the card. It contains the name of the man who gave the final authorization. He's not listed in the official chain of command. He's not on any radar. But he's the reason your file was buried, and the reason I changed the will. If Trevor is involved, it's because someone gave him incentive. Someone who needed to discredit you before this all came out. Find him. Don't stop. I'm sorry I couldn't say more when I was alive. But I believe in you. Always have. Dad. Emily read the letter twice. Her hand steadied despite the pressure building in her chest. She passed the photo to Nathan. Do you recognize him? He squinted at it. No name. She shook her head. Nothing written on the back. But this card. She held up the memory card. He says it contains a name. Nathan turned to the laptop. Let's find out. He inserted the memory card into the auxiliary reader. After a few seconds, a folder appeared labeled K-Directive. Inside was a single video file and an encrypted text document. He opened the video. The footage was grainy but clear enough. It showed a briefing room, military standard. 3 men sat at a table, facing someone off camera. One of the men was Trevor's age, dressed in civilian attire, but with the demeanor of someone used to giving orders. As he leaned into the light, Emily paused the video. That's him, she said. That's the man in the photo with my father. Nathan zoomed in, took a screenshot, and began cross-referencing through a secure directory. After a few minutes, a result appeared. Colonel Byron Keene, he said aloud. Retired. Former DoD contractor. Last known affiliation, Strat West Security Group. Emily blinked. That's the private firm Trevor partnered with last year. He said it was a new venture, government adjacent. Nathan kept digging. Keene was discharged under sealed circumstances. No records of misconduct, But no commendations either. Disappeared from official contracts 2 years ago. Emily clenched her jaw. He didn't disappear. He reemerged. Through Trevor. She stood and began pacing. That's the connection. Trevor couldn't forge government documents by himself. He doesn't have the clearance, the network, or the mind for it. But Keene? He's exactly the kind of man who could orchestrate the attack, the forgery claim, and the smear campaign. And he'd have every reason to do it, especially if he's using Ridge Glass tech. Nathan leaned back, stunned, which means this entire courtroom drama is just a distraction. They want the estate not for its land or assets, but because it was a vault. Your father hid something they needed buried. Emily turned toward the case again and opened the hard drive. The interface launched, revealing layers of classified documents, most labeled with obscure titles and encrypted tags. Nathan scanned through an open one marked Project Sightline. The contents were a blueprint, detailed schematics of a proprietary targeting algorithm developed during Ridge Glass, designed to interface with drone command centers. But it had one glaring flaw. Its predictive targeting often misidentified civilians as threats based on behavioral models. This is the tech that caused the deaths, Emily said, staring at the screen. They didn't shut it down. They refined it. Nathan highlighted the header. Look at the watermark. StratWest logo. So they didn't just steal it, she said. They commercialized it. Her voice dropped. They've been using it. Silence fell over the room. The implications were staggering, not just for her family, but for anyone tied to the mission. If StratWest had deployed Sightline in private operations, there could be dozens more casualties, maybe even foreign engagements disguised as corporate defense work. Nathan finally spoke. This is the missing link. If we can prove they used this tech post-Ridge Glass, we can expose everything. Keene, the manipulation of Trevor, the estate, sabotage. But we need more than just this file. We need application logs, deployment records. Emily's eyes narrowed. Then we need to find StratWest Data Center. Nathan looked grim. That won't be easy. It doesn't have to be easy, she replied. It just has to be fast. As dawn broke, they transmitted the video and data to their federal contact with a burner device. Minutes later, a call came through, not from the agents, but from an anonymous number. A disguised voice delivered a single line. Stop digging, or your father won't be the last to die. The call ended. Nathan looked at her. They're watching us again. Emily didn't flinch. Good. Let them. It means we're close. The sun hadn't fully risen when Emily stepped out onto the gravel lot behind the safe house, her boots crunching softly as she moved toward the tree-line. She needed a moment alone, even if the surveillance drones above were probably still sweeping the area in slow, silent arcs. The message from the anonymous caller still echoed in her mind, but it wasn't fear that weighed on her. It was clarity. This was no longer about inheritance, reputation, or even personal redemption. The forgotten mission, the buried technology, the fabricated accusations, each was a thread, and now they were pulling together into something far more calculated. Back inside, Nathan was already pulling files from the decrypted drive. He had bypassed a secondary encryption layer by isolating a timestamp code embedded in the video Emily's father had left behind. Once open, a directory appeared, one not visible before. It was labeled Op. White Shard AAR Unofficial. After-action reports. The kind not meant for review. The kind written by people who never expected their voices to be heard. Emily re-entered the room and read over his shoulder as he opened the first file. It was authored by a communications tech named Sergeant Wesley Dunn. The report was dated 3 days after the Ridge Glass operation had officially ended. Recovered hardware no longer responds to standard input protocols. Signal interference remains irregular. Civilian casualty report remains incomplete. Local source suggests the targeting error was not algorithmic, but premeditated. Name mentioned, Keene. Nathan kept scrolling, opening document after document. Several were written under aliases, others redacted entirely. But one thing became clear. Many on the ground knew something was wrong long before the operation went public. There were notes about altered satellite imagery, overridden access controls, Drone logs wiped mid-operation. This wasn't a glitch, Nathan muttered. This was a trial run. Emily didn't respond. She was staring at a map embedded in one of the reports. A cluster of coordinates, each marked with timestamps, stretched from Helmand Province to an unmarked region bordering a former CIA black site. None of these locations had been disclosed in the official Ridgeglass briefing she'd read during her assignment. These sites weren't part of our patrol zone, she said quietly. They were fallback points, emergency redirection sites. I was told they were irrelevant, abandoned, but these logs placed drones near them 2 days before the operation failed. Nathan turned to her. Someone was staging them in advance. Sightline wasn't just observing threats. It was targeting silent zones. And whoever manipulated the data wanted to ensure that when the mission failed, they could blame it on field intelligence. On me. She paced the room, hands on her hips, her mind moving faster than her voice. Keene wasn't working alone. He had access to restricted air support, manipulation rights over live data feeds, and immediate post-op suppression authority. That requires at least 3 authorizations, unless he was operating under a different contract, one hidden even from military oversight. Nathan sat back. Black budget. She nodded. And if that's true, then it means Ridgeglass wasn't just a mission gone wrong. It was a demonstration. They were testing something they wanted kept off the record. He rubbed his forehead. And they used your unit to do it. Set you up, let you take the fall, and erase the parts that didn't fit the story. Emily moved to the desk and tapped open another video file. This one showed drone footage. Thermal signatures moving through a ravine. At first it looked standard. Then, as the timestamp advanced, a series of digital overlays appeared. Targets were being marked automatically, not by a pilot, not by an analyst, but by the sightline system itself. Civilian tags were reclassified midstream. 2 vehicles marked as safe were suddenly labeled as hostile. Emily froze the frame. There, that's the moment. Nathan looked closely. Why did it reclassify? She zoomed in on a line of code running beneath the overlay. An override flag. It wasn't an error, it was a command. A name appeared next to the flag. External _override. Key for each. Nathan's voice dropped. We have it. Proof he intervened. Direct control. But Emily wasn't finished. She opened the last folder on the drive, labeled Echo_protocol. Inside were communication logs, emails, internal memos, and flag transmission reports from a Strat-West server. One of them was from a Strat-West executive to a private investor group. The system performed above expectations in hostile classification efficiency. Civilian identification remains a challenge, but with a Keen override layer, adaptive targeting thresholds can be implemented in real time. Application in non-military zones remains viable. Emily felt her breath catch. They were planning to export it, use it for domestic surveillance. Nathan scanned the message. This is enough. If we get this to the right hands. Before he could finish, the lights in the house cut out. Both of them turned at once. Emily grabbed the firearm from the drawer and signaled for silence. Nathan powered down the laptop and removed the drive. Within seconds, they were in the hallway, ears tuned to every creak of the building. A low whine rose in the distance. Not a vehicle. A drone. Emily moved to the back window and peered through the slats. A dark SUV had pulled up without headlights. 3 figures stepped out, 2 armed, one in a long coat. The one in the coat was speaking into a comms device. Nathan whispered, "That's not federal." Emily didn't respond. She pulled him toward the crawl space hatched beneath the kitchen. They dropped into the tight chamber, just as the front door was breached. Boots moved through the house, fast, methodical. Someone kicked over a chair. Another barked an order. The power cut hadn't been a warning. It had been the signal. Nathan kept his breathing controlled, the drive gripped in his hand. Emily held her pistol steady, angled toward the narrow gap between floorboards, watching shadows pass above. Then, as suddenly as they came, the intruders withdrew. Through the silence, they heard one of them speak on the radio. Target not here. Files wiped. They moved early. Emily listened until the vehicle pulled away, then emerged slowly, gun raised. The house had been ransacked, not destroyed, searched, calculated, efficient. The intruders hadn't come to kill. They'd come to erase. Nathan checked the security system. They looped the cameras. We've got nothing. Emily picked up the broken frame of her father's photo. The glass was cracked, but the image remained. Her father, standing beside Colonel Keene, smiling in a moment of trust long since betrayed. "They're trying to contain the leak," she said. "But it's too late. The files are out. And tomorrow, the courtroom will have to choose. Keep hiding the lie or let it burn." Nathan looked at her. "And if they try to shut it down? Then we go public, with everything." By morning, the safe house had been abandoned. Emily and Nathan had relocated to a new location arranged by one of the few federal contacts Emily still trusted. Special Agent Helena Ward, a seasoned intelligence liaison who had crossed paths with Emily once during a brief counterintel operation in Berlin. Ward was not part of the Strat West chain, nor the regional DOJ branches now tightened their grip on the case. She was independent, sharp, and, most importantly, not afraid to challenge authority when the situation demanded it. The new safe location was an old U.S. Marshals training facility outside Missoula, long since decommissioned, but still wired with secure comms and a backup generator. Ward met them at the gate, wearing civilian clothes and no badge, as if simply arriving for a hike. Her expression was unreadable as she shook Emily's hand. "I heard you stirred up a nest," she said. "Whatever's in that archive, it is people moving faster than I've seen in years." Emily followed her into the facility. Nathan carried the encrypted case and laptop, the drive still secured in his jacket pocket. "They've already tried to erase the house, scrub our systems, and intimidate my brother into silence," Emily replied. "But the worst part is, the courtroom is no longer neutral." Ward led them into a dimly lit operations room and gestured for them to sit. "You're right. Last night, Judge Peterson was placed under federal advisory oversight. Officially, it's a protection detail. Unofficially, it's pressure. I have it on good authority that a Department of Homeland Security liaison showed up unannounced at his home, claimed concern over national security leaks related to your case." Nathan frowned. "They're trying to sideline him." Ward nodded. "And they're not stopping there. The chain of custody on your submitted envelope is being questioned. Someone inside the DOJ filed a motion to seal it indefinitely pending forensic authentication protocols." Emily didn't blink, which means they want to bury it under process. Drag it out until public interest fades. Or until the evidence disappears entirely, Ward added. Nathan leaned forward. "We have a backup of everything. The Ridge Glass archive, the override proof, and the deployment logs linking StratWest to unauthorized surveillance. The data is complete, and we're not interested in waiting for permission anymore." Ward tapped her fingers on the table. "There's a window here, a narrow one. DHS wants to centralize the case, but until that transfer is authorized, Peterson still has jurisdiction. If you present the archive today in person, before the full transfer order lands, the court can vote to enter into permanent evidence." Emily locked eyes with her. "And if we miss that window, then they'll claim you interfere with a national security operation, and they'll have you in custody before nightfall." Silence settled over the room. Outside, the wind stirred the dead leaves. Emily stood. "Then we move now." 3 hours later, the courtroom had been reconfigured once more. A new security team had replaced the previous bailiffs, this one wearing DHS insignia. Emily and Nathan arrived under escort, with Ward trailing them through a back entrance. They entered the chamber quietly, and heads turned immediately. Trevor was already seated, visibly agitated. His legal team had grown since the last session. One of the new arrivals, a sleek man in an expensive suit, whispered to him while keeping a close eye on Emily. She recognized the look, not of a lawyer, but of a handler. The judge entered, accompanied by 2 DHS officers who took position behind the bench. His face was drawn, his voice more mechanical than before. "This session is being held under conditional federal observance. All proceedings are being recorded and monitored remotely. Any materials introduced must be reviewed before official entry into the case record." Emily stood before he could say anything more. "Your Honor, I am submitting new evidence. This includes authenticated after-action reports, targeting logs, and communications related to Operation Ridgeglass, as well as proof of unauthorized override by a now-retired officer, Colonel Byron Keene. These materials directly contradict the official narrative presented in prior federal summaries. The courtroom froze. The judge stared at her, then glanced toward the agents behind him. Under new guidelines, I must ask whether this material has been cleared by the Federal Security Review Board. Ward stepped forward. That board has not been legally authorized. Until a transfer order is signed and entered into record, jurisdiction still resides in this courtroom. One of the DHS officers spoke. Be advised, the material in question may compromise national intelligence operations. Emily turned toward him. It already compromised American lives. If you're concerned about damage, you should have intervened 10 years ago, before StratWest started repurposing military tech to run private war games. Trevor stood, voice shaking. This is a circus. She's faking all of it. You're letting her hijack a hearing about a will. Sit down. The judge snapped, the old steel briefly returning to his voice. You'll have your turn. Nathan placed a hard drive and sealed folder on the bench. These files contain unaltered logs pulled from StratWest archives and the Ridgeglass black box. We can verify their integrity right now. The judge hesitated, then nodded. Proceed. A technician was called into the room, federal, but not StratWest aligned. He inserted the drive into a clean machine and began the verification process under court supervision. It took nearly 15 minutes. No one spoke. When he finally looked up, his expression said everything. Confirmed. The files are authentic. No signs of tampering. All timestamps align with known Ridgeglass mission data. Trevor's attorney rose immediately. Your Honor, we request that this material be sealed pending full DHS evaluation. We cannot allow unverified intelligence to remain part of a probate case. Emily cut him off. This was never just a probate case. This was a targeted erasure. My father left me those documents because he knew the truth would be attacked the moment it surfaced. Trevor tried to have them destroyed. Someone sent men to kill me for them. And now you're asking the court to pretend they don't matter? The judge stared down at the files, then at the agents behind him. One of them nodded slightly, whether as threat or signal was unclear. Peterson finally spoke. I will enter the files into restricted evidence, but they will remain sealed until this court is formally released from federal observation. Until then, I can't authorize public disclosure. Ward stepped forward. Then we file an emergency motion to preserve all related evidence from alteration, deletion, or internal transfer, effective immediately. The judge didn't argue. Granted. Trevor's face had lost all color. He looked at Emily with something closer to dread than contempt. As the courtroom cleared, Ward pulled Emily aside. You've bought time. That's all. Now that the files are in evidence, they'll try to destroy your credibility. Next move's theirs. Emily nodded. Let them come. I'm not the one hiding anymore. The code had been there the entire time, subtle, almost invisible. It was printed in a light gray font along the border of the last page of one of the classified reports within the Ridgeglass archive. Not metadata, not a signature or reference number. Just a string of alphanumeric characters broken by 3 slashes and a timestamp. K3TBF19///08:21. Emily had overlooked it at first, dismissing it as an internal filing label. But now, with a federal clamp tightening around a case and digital channels under surveillance, every irregularity mattered. Back at the safe facility, now relocated once more to a secure underground operations hub borrowed from a federal investigator sympathetic to Ward, she studied the code under magnification. Nathan paced behind her, still processing the hearing's outcome. The files had been admitted into evidence, but sealed. That meant the truth was locked behind federal authorization walls, inaccessible until bureaucratic pressure allowed release. StratWest and its allies would use every hour of that delay to strike back, and they wouldn't do it through legal filings. Ward was already 2 steps ahead. She brought in a retired NSA cryptographer named Vincent Harper to look at the code. Within 30 minutes, He confirmed what Emily had begun to suspect. "It's a location key," Harper said. "Or more precisely, a server access string, not just an address, but an encrypted gate into a standalone environment. That timestamp? Likely the unlock window. You miss it, and it self-destructs or locks out permanently." Nathan leaned in. So this was left intentionally. Whoever embedded it wanted it to be found, but only under specific conditions. Harper nodded. "It's rare, but we've seen it before in dark network protocols. A signature used by field agents to direct successors to non-index servers. Whoever placed it there didn't trust traditional archives. They were hedging against deletion." Emily crossed her arms. "Can you trace it?" Harper hesitated. "I can try, but it's not a URL. It's a directional cipher, a pointer, not a destination. I'll need to run it through a custom rig off the grid." Ward gave a nod. "Do it." The rest of the day passed in hushed activity. Nathan reviewed contingency legal strategies, while Ward monitored federal movements. Meanwhile, Harper worked in a sealed chamber on the other side of the facility, decrypting line after line, until, hours later, he emerged with something new. "It's real," he said, placing a portable drive on the table. A full image of the server. "I got in during the exact timestamp. The window was tight, under 5 minutes. It would have evaporated if we'd hesitated." Emily opened the drive on a clean terminal. Inside were just 3 folders. The first, labeled Ridge_Alpha, contained raw operational data, drone footage, intercepted transmissions, command logs. Nothing they hadn't already seen. The second folder, Echo_Applications, was filled with deployment manifests listing StratWest locations, personnel names, and tech iterations of the Sightline system across 3 years. But it was the third folder that made them all stop. It was titled August_Contract. Emily opened the first file. It was a scanned document, signed and dated August 7, 2011. The signatories, Colonel Byron Keene and an executive representative from a government tech contractor known only as Altherian Systems. The document outlined a subcontract agreement, bypassing traditional military authorization, to adapt and test targeting AI on unlisted field assets under the label Behavioral Risk Profiling. Nathan read aloud. Use of experimental analytics during real-world operations. No formal oversight. Clearance delegated to Field Director Keene. All results to be compiled in shadow index reports for internal use only. Ward cursed under her breath. They built a private war algorithm, one that learned from actual deaths. Another file followed, a series of internal memos between Keene and StratWest leadership. In one, Keene detailed the transfer of salvaged drone footage and predictive models into a proprietary system labeled Helix. It had been in development prior to Ridgeglass, but the operations fallout provided the perfect live correction environment. They didn't just refine Sightline, Emily said slowly. They evolved it. Helix is the second generation. And then came the most damning file of all, a digital invoice sent from StratWest to a federal agency, carefully worded to describe covert logistical support and remote threat neutralization over a 6-month period. The recipient? A contractor operating in the same district, where Trevor had recently filed expansion documents for a security firm co-owned with Keene. Emily turned away from the screen. This is the leverage. Not just proof of Ridgeglass sabotage, but financial links between Keene, StratWest, and Trevor. They funded the smear campaign to prevent any of this from surfacing. My father didn't just hide the archive. He kept a ledger. Ward didn't waste time. This goes to oversight. Not DHS, not DOJ. We go to the top. Nathan spoke carefully. You know what that means. If you push this above the chain of command, someone will try to intercept it. I'm counting on it, Ward replied. The plan was set in motion that night. Harper created 3 mirror drives of the server image. One was designated for oversight delivery. One was kept in the facility's secure vault. The third, per Emily's request, was given to a neutral journalist with instructions not to release it unless she failed to report in within 48 hours. At dawn, Emily and Ward prepared to make the drop at a secure location outside Helena, where a congressional oversight investigator agreed to meet under quiet terms. But as they exited the facility's back corridor, Nathan received a call, burner line, no caller ID. He answered. The voice on the other end was calm, male, and measured. "You're holding something you don't understand. Turn over to Helix data." And this ends quietly. No more court. No more hearings. Just silence. You'll get the estate. She'll be left alone. All of it can go away. Nathan stayed quiet. Then the voice added, "But if you move forward, your client will never testify. Your firm will be discredited. And Strat West will still win." The call ended. Nathan turned to Emily. "They know. They're offering a deal." She didn't hesitate. "Then we're getting close." The morning after failed intimidation call, Emily stood before the mirror in the small quarters she'd been given in the temporary operations hub. Her reflection was calm, her posture straight, but there was a cold fire behind her eyes. The documents had exposed more than Strat West crimes. They had drawn a target on her back and confirmed her worst suspicion. Trevor wasn't a bystander. He had been complicit, and for longer than anyone imagined. Across the hallway, Nathan was on a secure line with Ward, coordinating a handoff to oversight. The third drive was already en route under protection of 2 former federal agents working with Ward's unofficial intelligence network. The hearing to finalize the will's probate had been scheduled for that afternoon, but Emily knew it was no longer about the estate. It was about legacy, truth, and exposing a chain of corruption that extended far beyond the family name. Trevor had not been seen since the previous day's hearing. His legal team had withdrawn from communication, citing client instability and emotional strain due to excessive legal pressure. But Emily knew that language for what it was, an internal unraveling. Hours later, as the courthouse filled once again under tightened federal observation, Emily entered through the side door reserved for secure participants. She moved quietly past rows of agents, court staff, and government observers, most unfamiliar, some clearly there under orders to document every breath she took. The room was different this time. Tense, almost expectant. The judge sat stone-faced, still flanked by 2 DHS monitors who watched every interaction with detached precision. Ward was present but seated far to back, having officially withdrawn her role to avoid accusations of tampering. Nathan sat beside Emily, his notes clean, his expression unreadable. Then the doors opened and Trevor walked in. At first glance, he was composed, suit pressed, hair trimmed, but the closer he came, the more visible the cracks became. He had lost weight. His eyes darted, scanning the room with frantic energy, and his jaw was clenched so tightly it seemed to ache. He didn't sit. He marched directly to the front and addressed the bench before being called. "Your Honor, I request to make a statement before these proceedings continue." Judge Peterson looked surprised but gestured for the bailiffs to let him speak. Trevor's voice was thin, strained. "I've made mistakes. I've questioned my sister's history, doubted her credibility. I've said and done things in this courtroom that I regret, but I never signed up for this." He gestured vaguely toward the federal observers. "I didn't know who Keene really was. I didn't know about Ridge Glass. He faltered, "I just wanted what I was owed." A rustle moved through the room, and Emily stared at her brother, not with triumph, but with something closer to wary curiosity. Trevor continued, "After Dad died, I was approached by a man who claimed to be part of a veteran verification group. Said Emily had fabricated her service history. He had documents, photos, even some old logs that seemed legit. He said if I cooperated, he could help me challenge the will, that it was the only way to stop her from ruining our family's name." He paused, looked at the floor. "It wasn't until I saw the documents entered into evidence this week that I realized he wasn't who he claimed to be. His name was never on record. His organization doesn't exist. And the materials he gave me, fake. All of them. I've been a pawn." The judge raised a brow. "And why admit this now?" Trevor looked at Emily. "Because they told me yesterday that if I didn't help shut her down before today's hearing, I'd be next." A murmur spread across the courtroom. The DHS monitors exchanged a glance, and one immediately signaled for court security to begin a formal transcription of Trevor's statement. Trevor took a shaky breath. "I was offered money, access, even future contracts through StratWest if I helped discredit her. I signed things I didn't understand. I gave them access to Dad's office. That's how they knew about the sealed envelope. Emily's stomach twisted. You gave them the location of the documents? Trevor nodded. I thought they just wanted to verify them. I didn't know they'd try to destroy them. Judge Peterson's tone turned cold. Do you have evidence of this arrangement? Trevor pulled a crumpled piece of paper from his pocket. A printed wire confirmation from a StratWest shell company. They paid me through a trust. This is the first deposit. The judge accepted it through the bailiff. Ward stood from the gallery, now fully attentive. I have more, Trevor added. Emails. Voice messages. I kept copies after I started feeling watched. One of the DHS agents stepped forward. We'll need to debrief him immediately. But Emily rose. No, he finishes this here. Today. Peterson considered, then nodded slowly. Proceed, Mr. Garrison. Trevor's voice was steadier now, as though the confession itself had begun to ease the weight crushing his chest. They wanted me to push a motion to have the will nullified based on mental incompetence. They drafted it. All I had to do was sign and submit. That motion would have pulled the case out of this courtroom and into federal jurisdiction. That was the plan all along. Not to win, but to delay. To bury. Nathan whispered to Emily. He's telling them everything. They didn't prepare for this. Trevor continued. The moment that failed, they turned, said I was a liability, that if I didn't help frame her for federal obstruction, they'd release a story claiming she doctored the military files. And if that didn't work, they'd have her arrested for a classified data theft. Whether it stuck or not didn't matter. Publicly, she'd be destroyed. Emily stood, slowly, and for the first time addressed her brother directly. Why now? Why not 3 days ago? Or before you gave him access to everything Dad built to protect me? Trevor met her gaze, shame raw in his voice. Because I didn't understand what you were protecting. I thought it was just legacy, some symbol. But it wasn't about Dad, or the will. You were protecting lives. The judge raised a hand, signaling for order. This court will suspend all probate motions effective immediately, he said. An emergency review panel will be convened to assess the newly submitted financial evidence. Additionally, this court will formally request federal investigation into StratWest Security Group, Colonel Byron Keene, and all associated contractors. One of the DHS monitors moved forward. We'll take custody of Mr. Garrison for his protection. Trevor didn't resist. As he was led away, Emily remained standing. She didn't follow him with her eyes. She didn't speak. Outside the courthouse, media presence had doubled. Word had leaked that an internal whistleblower had broken silence, and though names hadn't yet been confirmed, the speculation alone had already set networks into frenzy. Emily moved through the crowd like a shadow, protected by 2 federal agents now assigned to her. Ward caught up with her near the parking lot. You just ripped open the center of their operation, she said. That code? That server? Combined with your brother's testimony, it's a full map. There's no hiding anymore. Emily nodded. Then let's make sure they run out of places to hide. 2 days after Trevor's confession, the courthouse in Helena was under unprecedented federal oversight. The media blackout had crumbled within hours of his testimony, and now every corridor echoed with the boots of federal officers, special counsel representatives, and press personnel kept at bay by reinforced security protocols. What had begun as a quiet dispute over inheritance had become a lightning rod for a national scandal, and the courtroom where Emily had once stood accused now served as a battlefield for justice teetering between truth and institutional protectionism. Emily arrived that morning flanked by a U.S. Marshal in Ward, who now acted openly as liaison between the Oversight Committee and local authorities. Nathan followed closely behind, briefcase in hand, his phone filled with calls from journalists, government officials, and 2 separate congressional aides. Every one of them wanted the same thing, access to the archive. Emily had given the same answer to all. Not yet. Inside the courtroom, the energy had shifted. Judge Peterson looked older, more deliberate. His once conflicted expression had given way to the gravity of a man now holding back the weight of a crumbling wall. The day's hearing wasn't about further argument. It was about reversal, and not only of the probate process. At precisely 9 o'clock, the Oversight Committee representative entered the room, a woman in her early 60s with silver hair and a spine that gave nothing away. She introduced herself only as Chairwoman Allen. She addressed the bench first. Your Honor, pursuant to federal directive under Joint Investigative Authority, this court is to immediately release all sealed documents related to the Ridgeglass operation and Strat-West Security Group to the Committee for formal inquiry. In addition, we request that all materials pertaining to the inheritance case, specifically the original will, attached amendments, and sealed envelope contents, be reviewed in tandem with our team. Peterson nodded. You have jurisdiction, but I will retain active oversight until this review is completed. Allen accepted the terms. That is agreeable. We will also require deposition from Emily Garrison, as well as any individuals involved in the handling, transmission, or attempted destruction of classified materials, including the petitioner's brother. Emily stepped forward before Nathan could interject. I'll testify, under oath, but the full server data and field reports must remain outside federal encryption custody until your committee completes its analysis. We've seen what happens when those files disappear. Allen studied her, then gave a subtle nod. Agreed. The server image will remain in triplicate custody, one with your counsel, one with this court, and one with our internal tech division. Any tampering with the drive will trigger a full investigative escalation. As she returned to her seat, Nathan leaned toward Emily. That's the opening we needed. What followed was not dramatic. There were no explosive revelations or interruptions, but it was no less critical. The court officially withdrew its hold on the probate delay, ruling that the attempted interference from Strat-West had nullified any prior claims of fraud or misconduct. The will, in its original amended form, was declared valid and fully executable. All assets were formally transferred to Emily Garrison, with a further condition added by Judge Peterson. Until the conclusion of the federal investigation into Strat-West and associated entities, any financial transfers, sales, or third-party claims related to Garrison Estate are frozen under protective clause, at the court's discretion. Emily didn't argue. She wasn't there for the money. The real reversal came just after noon. Chairwoman Allen rose again. This time present a preliminary finding from the Oversight Committee's review of the Strat-West deployments. Based on data recovered from the encrypted Helix logs, she began, we have verified no fewer than 6 instances in which the predictive targeting AI was used without proper civilian clearance in domestic surveillance operations, under contracts not disclosed to any branch of federal law enforcement. These operations included real-time behavioral profiling, target acquisition simulations, and in 2 cases, remote active threat intervention without direct human authorization. The room was silent. In each instance, Allen continued, authorization was routed through an unregistered Strat-West command protocol signed under the name K Directive, cross-referenced with Colonel Byron Keene. Emily's voice was steady. That's the same protocol referenced in the server access string on the Ridgeglass documents. Yes, Allen confirmed. And we now believe it to be the foundation of a rogue military-to-private tech pipeline intended to bypass oversight under the guise of contracted security expansion. Peterson looked as though the weight of his robe had just doubled. And what of the petitioner's connection? Allen paused. Trevor Garrison has been cleared of direct knowledge of operational intent. However, financial transfers made in his name from shell companies controlled by Keene suggest he was used as a pass-through to fund legal actions intended to suppress evidence. He is cooperating fully, and his testimony will form a key element of the committee's final report. Nathan leaned over. They're getting ready to take Keene down. But Allen wasn't done. We are also filing a motion with the Department of Justice to request immediate indictments against Strat-West's executive board and project leads. Colonel Keene is currently considered a fugitive, having disappeared from his last known location less than 24 hours ago. Emily inhaled slowly. He's running. Allen nodded. Yes, but he won't get far. With the reversal now complete, the court moved quickly to close the session. The will was filed. The documents transferred. Emily signed the estate confirmation, with Ward standing beside her. Outside, the press swarmed the steps, but she didn't stop. She had no comment, no victory statement. There was still one thing left to do. That evening, as dusk fell, Emily returned to the ranch. It was quiet now. The property cordoned off by temporary fencing and patrolled by private security provided by Ward's team. The land, once merely an inheritance, now stood as the origin of everything. The hiding place of files, the beginning of the truth, and the last place she'd spoken with her father. She entered the house alone. No agents, no attorneys. In the back room, behind the old desk where William Garrison had written his final letters, she found a new envelope tucked behind a false panel in the wall. Inside was a single photograph. Her father in uniform, standing next to a young man she didn't recognize, wearing a patch with the insignia of a now-defunct experimental AI unit. On the back, her father had written just one line. They always knew someone would come looking for the truth. I'm glad it was you. Emily placed a photo in her coat pocket and stepped back into the fading light. 2 weeks had passed since the courtroom reversal, and though Emily had remained mostly out of the public eye, her name had begun to surface in headlines far beyond Montana. Journalists initially chasing a bizarre inheritance case had shifted focus to something more consequential, a whistleblower who exposed a secret military-to-private tech pipeline with national security implications. The Strat West story had broken wide open, and with Keene still on the run, the urgency surrounding the investigation intensified by the day. The Oversight Committee, operating under direct congressional mandate, had begun conducting public hearings. Emily had testified in closed session the week prior, submitting further documentation recovered from her father's secondary files, including handwritten notes, internal Strat West memos, an original draft of the Ridgeglass Directive, documents that showed, in plain language, how Keene had co-opted a classified program and transformed it into a monetized surveillance model. Her testimony alone might not have been enough, but combined with the Helix server logs and Trevor's full cooperation, the narrative shifted. Keene was no longer simply a rogue officer. He was being described by officials as architect of an unauthorized, for-profit adaptation of military intelligence tools, and his relationship to Strat West Executive Board was now the subject of a widening criminal investigation. Despite the federal storm raging in Washington and the tech corridors of Virginia and Nevada, Emily had chosen to remain in Montana. The ranch, quiet, wind-beaten, and still haunted by the weight of her father's absence, had become her base of operations. It wasn't just symbolic. The land, like her history, was finally being rebuilt. Nathan arrived mid-morning, his SUV kicking up dust as it approached the long driveway. He stepped out with a half-folded newspaper tucked under his arm. "You've been featured on the front page again," he said as he handed it to her. "This time without any question marks around your name." Emily took the paper without a smile. The headline read, "Veteran Silence Shatters Defense Contractor Empire." Below it, a still frame of her during the closed testimony. Face partially shadowed, posture firm. She skimmed the article, then folded it and set it aside. "I didn't come here to be a headline," she said. Nathan followed her inside, taking note of the visible changes. The once darkened interior had been cleared of its dusty silence. Renovations had begun. Walls freshly painted, structural repairs underway, and new furniture delivered in clean crates stacked along the hallway. But it wasn't a remodel for comfort. It was being repurposed. "I got the architectural renderings," she said, handing him a folder. 3 guest rooms for temporary housing, a communal kitchen, conference room upstairs, and I'm converting the barn into a workshop space. Nathan skimmed through the designs. "It's a full reintegration facility." Emily nodded. "For veterans without records, contractors who were buried under non-disclosure, operatives who served off books and were left with nothing but redacted files and broken timelines." She led him into what used to be her father's study. The heavy desk remained, but the walls now displayed military badges, certificates of unacknowledged service, and letters from anonymous former personnel who had already begun reaching out. "I've received 14 letters," she continued. "Men and women who worked in programs like Ridgeglass. Some didn't even know what they were part of until they saw the hearings." Nathan placed the folder down carefully. "Are you ready for that? To carry their stories too?" "I'm not carrying them," she said. "I'm making space for them to speak." Outside, A pickup truck pulled into the driveway. An older woman stepped out, holding a parcel wrapped in heavy paper. Emily met her at the gate. "I hope I'm not intruding," the woman said, voice quiet but firm. "My name is Denise. My brother served in a program called Hawkeye Echo. Never got any benefits. Died 2 years ago. They told us he was never enlisted." Emily took the parcel. "You're not intruding. You're the reason this place exists." That afternoon, Ward called from D.C. Updates came fast. Stratwest's assets had been frozen. Several executives had turned over internal records to reduce their sentences. Keene's last confirmed location was traced to a private airstrip in South America, and federal teams were coordinating with international agencies to intercept him. A final subpoena had been issued to the shell corporations used to route surveillance contracts, one of which had direct ties to an active lobbying group with congressional connections. "The fallout is going to last for months," Ward said over the line. "Maybe longer." "I'm not looking to clean up Washington," Emily replied, "but I'll make sure what happened here never gets buried again." Ward paused before saying, "They're drafting an official review board for special operations anomalies. They want you to consult. I'll think about it." After the call, Emily returned to back of the ranch where the field stretched toward the horizon, untouched since her childhood. She stood near the fence line as the wind swept across the grass. The silence was no longer heavy. It was steady, peaceful. As dusk fell, Nathan joined her, 2 coffee mugs in hand. "They asked if you'd be willing to speak at the Veterans Conference next month," he said, offering her one. "Main panel. Full audience." Emily stared into the horizon. "I'm not ready to talk about myself." "Then talk about the others." She didn't answer right away, but then she nodded. That evening, as the sky turned to slate and stars blinked into view, Emily returned to the study and opened the drawer of her father's desk. Inside was the photo she had found behind the panel, the one with the young man in the experimental unit insignia. She flipped it over again. This time, she noticed a faint imprint beneath the handwriting, a phone number, Montana area code. She reached for her secure satellite phone and dialed. It rang twice. Then a voice answered. "I was wondering when you'd find it." She didn't speak. The voice continued. "I'm not part of Keene's network, but I was part of what came before. If you're calling me, it means you're not finished yet." "I'm listening," Emily said. "Then meet me," the voice replied, "and bring the real version of the Helix logs. Not the ones they scanned. The ones your father never showed anyone." The line went dead. Emily lowered the phone. The work wasn't done. 3 days after the mysterious phone call, Emily stood once again at the edge of unfamiliar territory. This time not in a courtroom or on the battlefield, but in the gravel lot of an abandoned radio station tucked into the base of the Garnet Mountains. The sky overhead was washed in cold grays, and the wind carried the brittle sting of early winter. She had come alone, carrying with her the original Helix log, an unscanned, unsubmitted version copied by her father long before the official files had been released to the committee. No one was supposed to know this version still existed. The voice on the phone had said nothing more. No names, no affiliations, only that her father had left behind one last piece of the truth, entrusted to someone outside the system, and that she would understand why it had stayed hidden all this time. She waited for nearly 20 minutes before a vehicle approached from the south, a faded green Jeep with civilian plates, and a single occupant, a man in his late 50s wearing a utility jacket and carrying no visible weapon. He stepped out cautiously, hands raised to show he was unarmed. "Emily," he said, voice low but steady. "My name is Carl Devon. I worked with your father during his time at Falcon Ridge, before Ridge Glass even had a name." She didn't speak at first, just observed. His posture was honest, his movements careful, not calculated. "He told me," Carl continued, "that one day you might come looking, that when you did, I wasn't to stop you, but I was to tell you everything on one condition." "What condition?" she asked. "That you read his letter first. Not the one in the envelope, the one he left behind for himself." Carl reached into his jacket and pulled out a weathered envelope, sealed with wax. It bore her name in her father's unmistakable script, but beneath it was another name, one she had never seen before. William H. Garrison, classified designation, Gray Cord liaison. Carl handed it over, and Emily broke the seal with practiced fingers. The letter was dated more than 10 years ago. Emily, if you're reading this, then what I feared has come to pass. Not just that Ridge Glass would be exposed, but that you'd have to be the one to expose it. I never wanted you involved in this side of my life. I served the Air Force, yes, but I also served a separate directive, one that operated within the deepest corridors of intelligence oversight, known only to a handful of people across multiple administrations. Gray Cord was not just an observer agency. It was an early warning system designed to detect misuse of experimental military technologies, particularly autonomous systems. But the moment StratWest became involved, Gray Cord was shut out. Keene saw to that. He was clever, ruthless, and fully committed to his belief that predictive warfare would save lives by preemptively eliminating risk. What he couldn't see was that risk, by nature, is human, and so is error. You were never supposed to be involved in Ridge Glass. Your name was flagged on assignment lists only after I declined to cooperate with the Sightline handoff. I believe Keene authorized your inclusion to create leverage over me. You were never meant to survive that mission, let alone return with your integrity intact. But you did, and I knew from that moment on that the only chance we had to bring him down would not come through courts or government channels. It would come through legacy, through proof that someone could live through the worst of it and still stand up. The Helix logs you're carrying, they contain more than technical data. They contain patterns. Hidden within the raw code are identifiers for every field test StratWest ran using unauthorized AI, civilian monitoring, predictive behavioral tagging, even financial modeling for insurance fraud. That's what Keene was really after, not defense, but control. Carl will give you the last key. You'll know what to do with it. And no matter what they've said about me, about you, I want you to know that I never stopped believing in the one thing that made all this worth it. You, Dad. Emily lowered the letter, her grip tightening as the final line settled into her chest. Across from her, Carl opened the rear compartment of the Jeep and retrieved a small steel lockbox. Inside was a single thumb drive and a worn-out ID badge from an agency that no longer officially existed. This, Carl said, is the Gray Cord seed key. It's the master protocol that unlocks the hidden layers inside the Helix system. Without it, the logs are just noise. With it, you can trace every legal deployment, every unauthorized modification, every decision Keene and StratWest tried to bury. Emily accepted the drive. Why didn't you come forward sooner? Carl exhaled. Because when you've lived long enough in the shadows, you stop trusting the light. But your father, he never gave up on it. He knew that one day the system would crack. And when it did, it needed someone on the outside willing to walk back in. She left the radio station just before nightfall, the Gray Cord key secured in her jacket. The ride back to the ranch was silent, save for the steady hum of the road beneath her tires. Her father had seen the betrayal coming long before it arrived. He hadn't just left her pieces of the truth. He had prepared her for it. By the time she reached the house, Ward and Nathan were waiting. She laid the drive on the table and plugged it into the offline terminal where the full Helix logs were stored. The system recognized the key immediately. A new interface appeared, red, stark, and filled with markers stretching across the country. Each marker represented a deployment node, surveillance, predictive analysis, behavioral intervention. More than 70 nodes across 17 states, active over the last 9 years. Some within government contracts, others fully black ops, buried beneath commercial labels and private contractor shells. Nathan's voice was barely above a whisper. This is a map of a shadow infrastructure. Ward stared at the screen. And with this, we don't just dismantle StratWest. We show the pattern. We prove they were building an unregulated domestic surveillance machine. Emily nodded once. The next morning, she contacted Chairwoman Allen directly. Within hours, the Oversight Committee had redirected its full resources toward the Gray Cord key. Within days, indictments expanded to include mid-level operators, data analysts, and StratWest financial arms. The Pentagon released a statement acknowledging gross misconduct and oversight of private military contractors, and pledged full transparency in the inquiry. Emily refused public interviews. She declined the speaking engagements, the television offers, the memoir deals. Instead, she focused on building the center at the ranch. It opened quietly 6 months later. No fanfare, no cameras, just a brass plaque outside the front door. Garrison House, for those who serve in silence. And behind the front desk, framed in glass, was the last letter William Garrison ever wrote.